And what I discovered really shocked me. It shocked me that there are rug looms, and there are brothels, and there are brick kilns, and there are, just every imaginable form that people's freedom are taken from them. They're forced to work against their will and not allowed to leave, and they're not paid any real wages. What do you call that? Human trafficking? Human trafficking seems to suggest there's some kind of, people smuggling or, moving people long distances. And what I found out is that 90% of the people who are enslaved in the world are enslaved within 10 miles of their home. It's not about immigration, migration. It is to our country because those would be the areas that would most quickly be rooted out and criminalized. So I had two things happen to me on my journey. You see, I am a matter of happenstance and circumstances. I was not looking to start Not for Sale. I was not looking to devote my life to ending human trafficking. First, I happened to go to the restaurant that's a human trafficking ring. I happened to be born with curiosity. Well, I end up going to Southeast Asia on this journey very early on. And I end up in Cambodia. And I wanted to see firsthand what human trafficking looked like, how they operated. I met a military intelligence officer with the Australian military, and he invited me to go on an undercover operation where he would pose as a client, a man looking for young girls, not unusual in Phnom Penh, and he invited me to be one of his friends. He would have a hidden camera, and he would get the transaction on camera, and then we'd leave. We'd create an excuse why we'd have to come back later. I thought this would be intellectually incredibly, illuminating for me, so I agreed to do it. I didn't think about how it was going to affect me emotionally to be in a room with 25 10-year-old kids. And when the trafficker, their owner, told these kids to go over and kind of flirt with me, 2 or 3 girls 10 or 11 years old, I just fell apart. I had 4 kids around that age myself at the time. And I could hardly keep it together. Thank goodness he was trained as a military officer, and he kept the thing going, and we were able to get the transaction on camera. But it was one part of evidence that would take years to bring this trafficking ring down. What I felt that night, the next night, and every night that week was a sense of desperation that I couldn't do anything for these young girls, thinking about what they would go through the next week. So it was in Cambodia I carried this experience that I wasn't looking for to Thailand. And when I get to Thailand, I meet a woman who has had many of the same kind of sense of frustration that I had, but she just decided she was going to do something about it. Forget rule of law, forget putting the trafficker away. She was going to rescue the kids. She heard of these young kids that were in karaoke bars that were being used as young playthings. So one day she runs into a karaoke bar. She sees 2 girls and a little boy talking to an adult client. She just runs in, grabs them, and runs out. Not a very sophisticated intervention strategy. But she did this several times, and by the time I met her, she had 27 kids and no plan. She's living in the north of Thailand, right on the border where Myanmar, Burma, and Laos are today. And they are living basically with palm leaf roofs over dirt floors, just crude shacks. So here I take my second step. I said, okay, I promise what I'll do for you is that I'm writing this book. All the proceeds I gain from this book, I will devote to building a home for you and your kids. All right, small commitment, one small step. So I return to San Francisco, I'm writing my book, and I get a call from Thailand when I'm in chapter 2. And it's Krunam, my friend from Thailand who's done the rescue, said, David, there's 27 kids, now there's 53. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right, I'll build you 2 homes. And now I know I got to really write. I'm not that good a writer. I have got to really be determined now. So I'm with determination writing this book because I got to sell a lot of copies now. She calls me before I even finish it. Said, David, now I have 88 kids. Now I'm not that good a writer. I know that. So I started an agency called Not for Sale to raise funds to build a village. And you go to the north of Thailand today, and you're going to find this fantastic village where kids have dorms. They go to school. They're going to some of the best schools in the country. The first 4 just went to university. It really was emotionally charged for me when I went back just recently to meet some of these kids I had met in the field 7 years ago, now going to university. You know, it's inspiring. But at the same time, I almost felt like I was at the end of a river. I was pulling bodies out that were flailing and drowning. And it was good for those kids. I'm inspired by those kids. But that's compassion, and that's something that we all need to, as a part of our human sense of wiring. That's good for us. It's good for the world. But it's not enough. We also have to walk upstream and find out why so many kids are falling in. Why are being taken advantage of? Why are people being exploited? Now that's justice. Compassion and justice are both elements of bringing about social change. And so if I'm going to create a world where my team can fight a $32 billion industry, I need to find more creative ways to do it. Now today, Not for Sale does operate projects all over the world. We do have service projects, but they become the launching pad for something more. And I want to walk through that more with you. And I want that thinking to be a part of our conversation tonight. In Peru, we did much the same thing that we did in Thailand. We found young kids who were being forced into the commercial sex industry at a very young age. And so we had shelters for them. As our shelters began to thrive, we gathered data. Where were these kids from? How were they picked up? You see, this is where social research is so important. Data may not be the sexiest thing in social change, but it really rules. You want to change the world, have the best data. So we started to track back where these kids were coming from, and we discovered that many of them were coming from similar regions of the Amazonian region or the highlands, where there's a lack of rule of law and there's poverty. So that where there's a lack of rule of law and where there's poverty, people will be exploited. And those areas we saw, there was illegal mining, there's illegal logging, there's a whole set of industries that took advantage of the people who had no stability in their life. So if we were going to attack slavery at its roots, we need to figure out a way to reinvent our intervention. Yes, social service and compassion, but what's upstream? How do we begin to attack it at its roots? So we literally went upstream and we began to explore in the Amazonian region with 77 tribal groups of that area how they could identify their own social vulnerability. So while we're gathering these tribes in the Amazon region, we also gathered a tribe of a different type. You see, I go to Clinton Global Initiative and I love what happens at CGI and international events like the World Economic Forum Davos. But at the same time, I wanted to see more direct action that came out of the event itself. I live in a little town in California called Montera. Who ever heard of Davos before the World Economic Forum started happening there, right? So I decided I'm going to have my own forum. I'm going to call it the Montera Forum. And I'm going to invite the 50 most influential people I know. I didn't know you then, so I'm sorry. I'm going to invite the 50 most influential people I know, and I'm going to ask them to help me conceive of a strategy, a plan that could address the vulnerability that the 77 tribes were telling me about in the Amazon, but they had no resources, they had no connection. So marrying privilege or marrying people who had resources with those who didn't. And I brought some of the tribal people up to be a part of the room, and we began to discuss what does it look like to bring about long-term change. Now these people were a diverse group, a professional baseball player, investment bankers, people who had developed retail products. So we had a whole range of folks who showed up into the room. And by now, I'm an expert in forced work, so I locked the door and said, for 24 hours, you're not leaving. We're not going to leave until you solve this problem. And here's what I commit to you. On Monday morning, my growing staff at Not for Sale, we will implement whatever idea you come up with. Now, I didn't realize how stupid a promise that was until at the end of that 24-hour period, they told me that their idea was that they were going to develop a beverage that would be sourced from the herbs, the medicinal herbs that were legendary from that region. And they're thinking about right now, there's a growing trend in the United States, in Europe, in markets that are consumer driven. There's a growing trend to get away from heavy sugar drinks, drinks that are not good for you. Well, one thing that there's a plenitude of in the Amazon region are these great herbs that, cure things according to local legend, right? So we're going to create this beverage, and the idea was to create jobs for the people of the region that are harvesting and create communal gardens that are sustainable and scalable, that then in the process of selling the drink, not for sale, before I had to spend money on marketing and branding, now I've got a drink that does that marketing and branding for me. I tell you the story of not for sale as I show you my drink. And then in terms of the revenue that comes out of it, the net profits, we put a percentage back into the region of the Amazon to invest in infrastructure, schools, education, and healthcare, and technology training that would allow them to even scale the amount of sourcing they can do in that region. All right, it was a great plan on paper. Imagine on Monday morning, you know how to implement it. Now, a typical nonprofit would follow this scenario. So you know what? My cousin Betty, she always loved beverages, and she said she always wanted to do something like that. So why don't we talk to Betty and see if she'll start our beverage company, right? And then we go out to the local county fair, and then we'll go to churches and synagogues on, the weekend, and we see if people will buy our drink. And, you see the scenario? That's never going to work. In fact, I got this $32 billion competitor staring me in the face. So I said, look, I was an investment banker. Why am I turning into something different? Now here's the problem, is that when you start thinking about charity or nonprofit, you turn your brain off that enables you to be successful in other areas of life. Because there's a nonprofit way of doing things. Yeah, no money and little results, right? What would it mean to bring together the skills and resources that we use in worlds that we really care and value things, and we brought that into a world that needs value, that needs caring? I'm an investment banker, for goodness sakes. I know how to raise private equity. So we created a new company, we spun it off, and we started to raise private equity. The guy who came up with the drink, I made sure he put money in first. I said, look, if I'm going to do this, he's a baseball player for the Giants by the name of Jeremy Affeldt. I said, all right, you're going to help me. He goes, yeah, I'll get my friend Vernon Wells, plays for the Yankees. We'll both invest. And so I started getting angel investors first, right? So we raised the funds. Then I went out and found the best beverage maker in America. You see, if we're going to fight things like human trafficking, if we're going to fight extreme poverty, global warming, if we're going to fight those things, we need the best talent. When I go to the Clinton School, or I go to Harvard, or I go to Stanford, I make a presentation. I say, look, I need people who can really be talented and work with me. And someone goes, well, I'm hoping to get a job at Goldman Sachs or Apple, but if I don't, maybe I'll come and work for Not For Sale. I don't want you losers. I want the people who say, I want to work for Not For Sale because you're changing the world. Why are you going to go waste your time making money with something that's making little widgets or selling information across the web? What I'm doing is important. It's more valuable. But in order to do that, I can't just simply rely on you to make a sacrifice for, let me go work at poverty wages for 3 years and then I'll go find something else to do. Because that's not sustainable. I'm never going to keep talent around. So I need to be able to, one, give you a really meaningful post or assignment. Two, I got to pay you well. And three, I got to give professional development so you want to stay around. Right? So starting a Rebel, a drink, I just said, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find the best minds and the best talent. I found a guy who was the drink creator. He created Zico. I don't know if you know Zico. He created some of their best flavors. He won the Beverage Maker of the Year. I'm sure you attend that award ceremony right after the Oscars every year. I can't wait to go this year. And he went into the laboratory and he created a terrific drink. And it took us 18 months from the concept of a room like this filled with people to actually having a product that would go on the shelf. Roots, extract, bark, berry, and leaves. Be a rebel with a cause. Right? So we started first selling this in Whole Foods in Northern California. And because the sales were so good in Whole Foods this last first quarter, Southern California Whole Foods called and said, hey, how do we get it down here? And now we're in over 300 stores beyond Whole Foods in California, and we're coming your direction. We will be everything west of the Rockies, and then soon I'm moving to Arkansas. But the idea, again, is to tell the story of what a beverage can be. I mean, why would you drink a Pepsi? Why would you drink an Arizona soda? Why would you drink an Honest Tea? You can drink Rebel. And I'll tell you why. And the story flows. Right? But part of this is really critical, is that I have to be as excellent in the delivery of my business model as I am in the delivery of my social impact. You see, I have to be able to show on the ground, quarter by quarter, how we're bringing about a difference in the region where we are operating.